Okay, let's have a look at transform properties and techniques with Illustrator. We're going to be working very simply here with two very simple shapes and only talking about several of the tools that will allow us to make transformations. A quick recap, let's just talk about selecting one more time here. I'm going to use my selection tool to select this S-curve, and you can see that when this shape is selected, it has this blue bounding box around it. This basically just identifies that you have the object selected in its entirety. If I was to select that S-curve with my direct selection tool and click either on a segment or a point, I don't get that bounding box because it's specific to what points or paths that I am selecting for this shape. So the direct selection tool allows me to select points at which point I can move and relocate those anchors. I can mess with my Beziers and alter the form of my path, right? This is what's special about this tool, is that it gives us the possibility of editing the form itself with points independently from the entire object. Something I can't do if I select it with my direct selection tool, which I'm back on now. But what the direct selection tool does give us is the ability to make some quick transformations based on this bounding box. If for some reason you ever have artwork that's selected and you guarantee that you've clicked on it and selected, but you don't see that bounding box, it's a very simple solution to go to view. It's possible that you may have done a short key, what is a Shift Command B by accident, and it might have just hidden your bounding box. So you might have your selection tool rocking and you select something and you don't see that box. You can just go to view, show bounding box, and that'll pop it back up again. With these little handles, these little squares that are on the corners and then on the east, west, north, south parts of the bounding box, this is where you can do really quick transformations like scale. If I grab a corner, I can scale this on an X and Y coordinate, right? So I can go smaller on the X, taller on the Y, shorter on the Y. That's what a corner is going to give you the ability to do. If you grab a top or bottom handle, it's only going to be allowing you to scale this on the Y-axis. If you grab an east or west handle, it'll allow you to scale your object based on the X-axis. A few things about control over your scale. If you wanted to have a proportionate scale change where you're changing both the X and the Y together proportionately to maintain the integrity of your shape, you would grab a corner and you can hold down the Shift key, and while you scale that up or down, you can see that it is constrained proportionately, so my X and my Y both take the same amount of percentage of growth or shrink to make that work. That doesn't work if you grab the top or bottom handle or the sides, so it's only a corner. The other thing that if you notice, if you grab any handle, a corner or a top, it's basing the scale change off of the opposite point. So if I grab the top right corner, it's basing my sort of anchor off of the bottom left, and that's where that scale change is happening from. That little corner will never alter. It's only going to be the top right, and if I grab a left handle, its anchor is the right side. So you can see that there's that sort of relationship going on with these handles. You can bypass this and instantly change the anchor to be the center of your object. If you hold down the Option key on your keyboard and do that change, you can see that now I'm scaling directly from the center of this object, and that can be really handy sometimes if you're just trying to make a faster scale change, since you can go in both directions, it's kind of nice, but also could be a way for you to properly align other objects within themselves, circles or squares, whatever. And if you do that from the sides or the top or bottom, it just it keeps it based on the coordinate of either X or Y, depending on which one you grab, but it still scales it out from the center. If you hover your mouse outside of a handle, you'll see that you have an arced arrow. This means that you can rotate. So now I can rotate this object freely any way I want, right? If you hold down Shift, it'll constrain it with 45-degree increments, okay? So that's kind of handy too. If you need to do a total 180 flip, you can hold down Shift and you can feel it snap, boom, 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 and it's totally flipped upside down. It's great. All of these attributes are found in the object menu under transform. So here we can do a move and it opens up a window. How far do you want to move it? So it gives me coordinates. And the coordinates are based on your object's placement on the artboard. So if we talk about that real quick, 0, 0 is the very top left corner of your artboard. This object, as it's selected with the selection tool, has specific coordinates of its placement, and it also has information as to how tall or how wide or what the height is, right? So those are all properties that are found in the properties panel. If you don't have the properties panel open, you can get that from window properties, and then that'll open up a panel here where you can see that the transform information for this object gives me a coordinate. So I have my X and my Y, so that's the placement of this object on the artboard. It also tells me what the width and the height is, tells me if I've rotated it any certain degrees, and it's all based off of what reference point you are selecting in this little tiny box here. So right now, this X and Y coordinate is basing itself off of the top left corner. So right here, that is the coordinate. If I change it to the center, the absolute center of my object, you can see that those coordinates are updated. And if I go to the very bottom right, now it's telling me that my coordinate is, down here. So this is something to keep in mind as you try to do calculated moves or you think about your objects spatially in your artboard. So if I go back up to Object, Transform, Move, this is the coordinate system that we're looking at here, and it's basing it off of this top left reference point because that's what I have selected in the Properties panel. Other transform is the rotate, so you have the angle of rotation. If you typed in 45 degrees and you just want to see what it might look like, you can hit preview. So that's allowing you to execute a rotation or a transform without committing to it. You can just see what it looks like. At that point, if you're happy, you can hit cancel. I mean, if you like it, you'd hit OK, not cancel. But if you're just toying around, just hit cancel and get out of there. We have a reflect, and the reflect will flip your image based on the X or Y axis. So a horizontal flip doesn't really look much different, but a vertical flip, you can see that it has flipped and turned the other way. It's no longer an S, it's a backwards S. So you could hit OK and just have it be reflected, or you could even do a copy, which will give you a clone of your object that has been flipped over. And this is really convenient when you start to make more elaborate shapes or you need symmetrical design and layout. I'm just going to delete that and get rid of it. Select this guy again, going to Object, Transform. So that's what reflect was. Scale is just a window for making scale changes, either uniform, which is like holding down the Shift key, or non-uniform, where you can stretch it vertically or horizontally. The scale corners is if you're using a rounded rectangle, and it'll scale your corners for you, which is pretty convenient. Then we have scale strokes and effects, which we talked briefly about in the preferences movie from the first session. This would, if I scaled my object up 400%, the stroke that I currently have on here is 1 point in its width. If I selected scale strokes and effects and I increased it 400%, then I would have a stroke width of 4 because I'm multiplying it by 4 basically. Otherwise, if I didn't have that checked and I scaled this up 400%, my stroke weight would remain at 1. Want to see that happen? I'll go to 400%. We're going to scale strokes and effects. You can see that that stroke is definitely fatter than it was originally. If I uncheck it, now you can see that it's just one stroke or 1 point wide on that stroke versus 4 times, which would be 4 points. So that's what that does, and it comes in very handy. The last one is shear, and this is just a way for you to sort of, I'd say it's like faking italics. Previews on. So as I start to increase my angle of shear, you can see it's kind of stretching it out. Takes the top and slides it to the right, and the bottom slides it to the left unless I go negative, and then it'll kind of do the opposite. So that's what a shear is. All of those transforms are represented by tools. So if we go to the toolbar, there's a rotate tool, and hidden under there, whoops, I just double clicked on it. Hidden under the rotate tool is the reflect tool. So you can do these things by hand, which comes in handy. So the rotate tool, if I have that selected, you can see that there's an anchor point by default right in the dead center of my object. I can move that just by clicking somewhere else, and I've set my reference point. Now my second click will allow me to rotate it. So the first click is putting down your reference point. The second click is the actual rotation. So it allows you to base your rotation on a specific anchor to help you achieve whatever it is that you want to accomplish there. Then the reflect tool doesn't really work too well by hand, but all of these have this feature where if you double click on them, it opens up that window. This is where you can get the copy or a specific angle, horizontal, vertical, etc. It works much better if you just use the window instead of trying to use your hands to do a reflect. Under there we have a scale, and the scale is quite simple. Also is based off of a reference point that you can change. Right now it's in the center, so as I scale it, it's going to be scaling up or down, left and right, based off of the center. But if I wanted to change that, I can just click on a different anchor point area, and then I can scale that up. I can also oh, hey you, not that. I can double click on the scale tool and it opens it up. Let's just go back to 100. What is it doing? So there's the same window that you could get by going up to Object Transform. Hidden under the Scale tool is the Shear tool. So all of these things are available right here as well. So that gives you a quick run through transforms. It's going to be something that you do all the time, so get comfortable, practice, rehearse, see how it all works and how it might benefit you and your artwork. All right, thank you.